Hi there, welcome to Books for Believers, where we explore the world's great literature through a lens of wonder, wisdom, and biblical discernment. Today, we're turning to a tiny but towering poem, Ozymandias, by Percy Shelley's haunting meditation on time, pride, and the ruins of power. And to introduce this wonderful poem, I'll hand you over to Dane.
In just 14 lines, Shelley delivers a prophetic punch that feels strikingly relevant to our world of empires, personal, political, even religious, that rise and fall. Why this poem? Well, it fits our May theme of human pride, hidden evil, and the collapse of reason. Ozymandias reminds us that no human glory endures, and that the moments of pride inevitably crumble into sand. As this poem is rather short, we're going to read it in its entirety here, and then we'll hand it back over to Brad to start our great discussion this afternoon on Ozymandias. Ozymandias by Percy Bysshe. I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert, near them on the sand. Half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things. The hand that mocked them, and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear: My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sand stretches far away.
Excellent. So this is one of the great poems of the English language, and most of us will have encountered it likely in school. If you took any literature classes in high school, this is one you're almost certain to have encountered. And it introduces our this poet Shelley to us. Now, he is one of the major English Romantic poets, known for his radical political views, idealism, and passionate belief in individual liberty. We'll note that he was not a Christian and rejected traditional faith or religion altogether, definitely not a believer in any kind of Orthodox Christianity. And yet, what we find from Shelley that in spite of these presuppositions and positions that he took, that he comes to an incredibly Christian theme, or one theme that is very well in line with the biblical worldview and outlook. So we're going to get to look at him through this life filled with controversy and exile, that his poetic brilliance was able to bring something to light that is meaningful to all humans, and particularly to Christians in this context. So with that, Dane, what do you have to say about this structure and literary character of this one?
Well, this one is a lot more regular than our Whitman poem that we did last time. Uh, Shelley sticks very rigorously to the sonnet form, which is 14 lines, 10 syllables per line, with usually a regular rhyme scheme, although that here is something that Shelley plays with for the purposes of his theme. But other than that, we've got 14 lines, 10 syllables, all in an iambic pentameter except for one line. But as I mentioned, the rhyme scheme is a mess here. And I think that's purposeful because it's not as if he abandoned rhyme scheme altogether, but he plays with it and he uses this broken rhyme to really jumble the middle, especially as we're about to be introduced to Ozymandias himself, because it's a bit of a mind-bending conclusion that Ozymandias himself presents that everything that he has is here to put everyone else to shame, and yet all that's there is this broken visage, these legs sticking out of the sand, and nothing but sand. And yet he's saying, "Look at my might and look at my power." And so at the beginning of the poem, we do have every other line rhyming for the first 6 lines. And you could even say that lines 2 and 4 rhyme, although not in the American dialect, but in the English dialect, certainly they do. Uh, and then the rhyme scheme kind of jumps a little bit, starting to get into lines 7 and 8. But there's one line in here which has no rhyming pair, only one. And that is the line, My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings.
Mm.
It stands out among the rest of these rhymes as something that just doesn't fit. And I think that's beautiful what Shelley has done here. And he precedes this by breaking the iambic pentameter as well. The only line that doesn't fit in iambic pentameter is, on the pedestal, these words appear. It has two downbeats and two upbeats which just kind of trips you up right before you come to this line which shares no rhyme. And we could say it has no rhyme or reason in Ozymandias' own conclusion of himself. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. We can say certainly he's not. He is not the King of Kings, although, in a testament to human pride and human self-engineering here, we could say that certainly he probably thought in his day that he would be. Whoever it was that crafted this great stone empire that likely went along with the great stone statue, thought that his world would last forever, but now it's just crumbled in sand and as broken as Shelley's rhyme scheme.
Mm. Absolutely, and it's really cool to see how that power of the intentionality of the syllables and the rhyme scheme points out his major theme. What I love about this poem and why it's always spoken to me is the visual imagery and the dramatic irony that it takes
Mhm.
place within it. Right, so you've got this. Fellow, presumably Shelley, speaking as himself, and I don't think this is an actual event, of course, but he's
Mhm.
traveling in this antique land. So you almost imagine kind of dressed up like Lawrence of Arabia as he's walking around and sees, as you do in so much of the ancient world, these huge ruins of statues. And we can so easily visualize it. Kind of reminds me of Nebuchadnezzar's statue, to himself
Mhm.
as he's looking at what used to be and imagining what this huge great statue must have looked like, right? And yet now it's half sunk, and the face, right, obviously the important symbolism of the visual element of that, who's
Mhm.
frowning, and his wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command. So it shows that while this statue was commissioned, that it was meant to portray a very authoritarian, unhappy,
Mhm.
tyrant overall. And
Yeah.
even that phrase, right, as he commands, you see he stumbles upon this little pedestal that tells you that his name is Ozymandias, the King of Kings. Of course, this would have been a title taken by the Persian emperors, probably first in history, because they were empire building. And so they took this, hey, I am the king of all these other kings, right? And as you pointed out, he may well have been in the context of the fiction of the poem, right? He
Mhm.
was emperor over many lands, over many nations, as you look at it, and this in, incredibly high impact. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. The irony here
Mhm.
being that he is very clearly saying to all those around and all of history to go forward, no one's as mighty as me. Look at all that I've done and despair that you'll never be as great as I. And yet it takes on this powerful secondary significance that is far more important to the poem, which is
Mhm.
everyone who achieves anything to this degree, ultimately it comes to an end and is reduced to rubble and dust. And as the poet says, nothing beside remains round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare. So this picture of human hubris and arrogance and the idea that we are going to accomplish something or rule something or overcome something that is going to
Mhm.
be meaningful for all history is absolutely crushed to pieces by the reality of the procession of time and the ongoing days and years and centuries that follow. And I think got a powerful statement really about art, because this poem is speaking about as artistic revelation to us, we might say, not divine revelation, but artistic revelation to tell us about and warn us about the impermanence of our success. But it's also based about a piece of art, this great statue that was made for this purpose, and it also crumbled. And while it didn't come to portray what it was intended to, it had an even more meaningful lesson to teach us that we can gain looking at any other kind of art or sculpture as we look at societies that are in ruins.
Certainly. Well, no, and I think one of the reasons why it's resonated so well with really at the beginning of the modern world here at the late 1800s, is because this is so true to human nature and human history, where it is something that draws us into the past, but also speaks to our present. where we look throughout history at these great statues that have been erected, like the statue of Nebuchadnezzar that he erected and commanded worship towards, or the Colossal of Rhodes, or Colossus of Rhodes,
Mm.
that was supposed to stand for eternity and that would strike fear in the hearts of those who would visit Rhodes and would see the greatness of the empire. And yet, though it's one of the wonders of the ancient world, where is it today? The
Mm.
Hanging Gardens of Babylon, where are they today? They're in ruins. They're broken. And so Shelley, in crafting this poetic fiction, is actually speaking a poetic truth about human nature throughout history. And Shelley, standing on this precipice of the modern age where we're industrializing like crazy and we've got these skyscrapers going up all over the world. I mean, we look at the Burj Khalifa, for example, in Dubai, and someday, I mean, if the Lord doesn't return soon and turn it back into molten glass,
Mhm.
it's going to be sand. Um, and it's no different history and the present. I mean, the one thing we can say is different is we have this collective um, amnesia for the ancient world, where the old world kind of died. I guess you could kind of point to the Ottoman Empire and its long duration for a lot of that forgotten Middle East history and just how close it is to us
Mm.
in the grand scheme of things. Shelley has touched on that and brought it into the modern age for us. Something that, like in his day and age, they were ex excavating portions of Egypt and finding these grand statues that have been just beaten and pummeled down by very simple natural forces. And to see that they don't stand up nearly at all, even to the natural forces of nature that God has, let alone the greatness of his plans compared to the best laid plans of men.
Absolutely. And doesn't it just smack with a person who, of a person who is, if not familiar with the book itself, although I'm sure he was, but the theme of Ecclesiastes?
Oh, certainly,
I mean,
certainly.
the reality of our seeking after our own legend or legacy or fame or power or whatever it is, it just inevitably winds up to be a chasing after the wind. It inevitably winds up being in its sum total useless. You're just building up things for other people to inherit or to destroy, that they'll just
Yeah,
blow away.
yeah. We can look at these great and massive statues that took us so much power to build and see that they're not any less fragile than the grass that grows up in the field and soon withers and flies away. Uh, that's really the greatest that Ozymandias has to say for himself is that once I was and now I am no more. But the King of Kings will never have that to say, but will always be from eternity to eternity.
Mm. Well, and to me, if for listeners, and I imagine that Shelley was, but you got to
Mhm.
be familiar with the Daniel 2 statue, right? This huge statue that Nebuchadnezzar sees in his dreams, and it's really a fascinating thing to me because when God chooses to reveal the procession of nations to this pagan king, it's a big, beautiful idol. It's a statue, right? And it stands in all of its glory, and he's told that, oh, the head that represents you, Nebuchadnezzar, it's gold. And so what does Nebuchadnezzar do? Well, exactly what Ozymandias did in a fashion, right? I'm gonna make a whole
All
one, all me, all me, head to toes, never-ending empire. And of course it comes to the same end that God declares, right? And it will, as we look to the eschatology, to the future.
certainly. Certainly. And I mean, this really points towards that collapse of earthly glory. As much as Nebuchadnezzar was truly a magnificent emperor in a human perspective, and even in a way, in a divine perspective, I mean, God put him in a very unique place in history to be the head of gold in this Gentile power that would dominate the world for centuries. And so he recognizes the position of glory that God has put him in, but rather than seeing God as the one who has lifted him up, he sees himself
Mm,
as King of Kings, essentially. And that's again the beauty of the book of Daniel, where we see this progressive humbling of Nebuchadnezzar until even he, like this Ozymandias, is found waste in the wilderness.
mm.
until he's able to humble himself and recognize God's providence and God's sovereignty over all these things. Um, the story of Nebuchadnezzar is a redemptive story. The
Hmm.
story of Ozymandias is not a redemptive story, but it is one that perceives the same issue in human nature, this desire of self-aggrandizing that really just has to collapse before the true King of Kings.
Absolutely. And I do think it's fun to notice that the book of Daniel also provides a dual perspective on these nations, right? So, from Nebuchadnezzar's standpoint, it's portrayed to him as this big, beautiful idol that God will crush, right? Destroy with the stone cut without hands. But when Daniel has received personal revelation about this, it's not a big, beautiful statue. It's these terrifying beasts that are tearing and destroying and killing, and they're awful and horrifying to look upon. And I think it shows us in some level the way that man views things and this glory and power, and the way God views that sort of self-glorifying desire, right? From man's perspective, oh, we look up to and we worship, we say, oh, what a great man is Nebuchadnezzar or Cyrus the Great or whoever it is. But from God's perspective, they're nothing but wild animals who are destroying and standing in the way, or standing in opposition, probably, to God's great plan and glory upon the earth.
Yeah. And well, again, without assuming that Shelley is basing his analysis off of Daniel, it rings true with what you just said. I mean, he even includes this line describing the expression on the face of the statue as one that's a little nearer a ferocious beast than a kindly king. It's a wrinkled lip and a sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions red which yet survive stamped in these lifeless things.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, this is not a pleasant looking statue. This is one that would strike fear into the hearts of those who saw it, in the same way that those beasts struck fear into the heart of Daniel when he saw them, and when he saw the trampling over the world that they would do. And it kind of reminds me of God's warning to Samuel as well, when Israel's seeking for a king in the first place, a king like the kings of the surrounding nations. And he essentially says a king is going to dominate and trample you.
Mm.
Uh, Israel had a king already, and God was clear to tell Samuel, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. Why? Because God is the king of Israel,
Mm.
and he's going to put his own son on the throne of Israel. Uh, and so they were rejecting the perfect rule of God over their nation in hopes of having a king that would trample over them, essentially. And this is the hubris of mankind. We have these plans, we have these desires, the best political schemes that we can come up with, and we think that somehow they're going to be a savior. But really, no matter what, all they're going to do is trample you down in a different way.
Mm. Absolutely. And again, these beautiful themes approached by a non-believer makes them almost all the more powerful, right? The reality
Mhm.
that even the clear-minded, atheist or God rejecter is going to see that ultimately this all comes to an end. It reminds me of the Time Traveler by
Mhm.
Wells. He goes back into the past and sees something, but then he goes forward and sees this hopeless future where everything just kind of devolves into nothing and crumbles into stone and into uselessness. And he has a really profound line in there. He says, if this is the case, we must live as if it is not so. So the
Mhm.
atheist has, or this non-believer has, a worldview that doesn't accommodate their life. They have to live as if what they believe isn't true, right? And yet, what we see here is all the hope of the true kingship of Christ, that world, that kingdom that will not have an end, that will not crumble and decay. And it shows us a hope, or gives us a reason to hope in the gospel of Jesus Christ, to stop, as you so well stated, stop putting our faith and our confidence in human institutions and human leaders or in human powers or even in human philosophy, but rather turn to Christ alone and recognize that his reign is the only exception to this rule. It is the reign for which the earth was designed. And that gives us great hope because we can enter that kingdom, that time of the future. Our spot there is assured if we've trusted in Jesus Christ and his death for us, because we've been made qualified in him and worthy to take part in that kingdom. Not just take part in it, but scripture tells us to reign with him. It's a great and glorious thing.
Amen. No, I can only second your thoughts there that while Ozymandias kind of leaves us down in the dumps concerning human abilities, when we look at it in light of Scripture, I think we're prepared in the correct way to approach God the way that he ought to be approached, which is in humility and recognizing that the greatest we can do for ourselves is nothing but dust in the wind. But what God has planned for us and what God has done through his Son on our behalf and the promise in the glorification together with his Son is something that far outreaches any promises of a human government, of human powers, or even our best efforts at improving ourselves. God is really the only one that we can turn to where we won't end up as ruins in the sand. Mhm.
Absolutely. So Ozymandias isn't merely a poem of despair as it's presented, but it's actually a call to humility and to eternal perspective. In a culture that's
Mhm.
obsessed with achievement in image, Shelley's sonnet quietly reminds us that only what is built on Christ will last. So if you're looking for more reading beyond rereading this interesting and excellent poem, I would encourage you to pick up the book of Ecclesiastes. It challenges these themes and is really a challenging read for every believer or unbeliever alike to understand what is meaningful, what is eternal, and what is valuable. Also, the Isaiah chapter 40 for some biblical echoes on these themes. But
Mhm.
we want to, oh, and if you're looking for a modern poetic companion, W.H. Auden's The Fall of Rome is a great read as well. So, with that wrapped up, Dane, where are we headed next?
Well, in terms of poetry, the next poem that we're going to tackle on June 18th is Déjeuner de matin by Jacques Prévert, which is a uh, very well-known 20th century French poet. And it's going to be a dip into longing and loneliness, which again, we have happier themes coming in the future, but in the bright days of summer, it's kind of a melancholy way to look at um, life, relationships, and the human condition. So it will be a beautiful poem that we look at, and hopefully one that we can shine some biblical perspective on. But before we get to that, on June 18th, we've got another book that we're going to present to you all and hope that you'll read along with us. I know we've both done our rereads or first reads of this book and have greatly enjoyed it. That is the book Almond by Son Won Pyong. She is a Korean author, very popular in Korea these days. She has two books out, but she's also a film producer. Oh, this is a novel about a boy who cannot feel emotion due to a neurological condition, exploring empathy, trauma, and the need for human connection. And so we'll look at that and we'll look at it from a biblical perspective, as well as hopefully the intended point that Sonwon Pyong wants us to take away from this book. And I think it really is just a beautiful story of friendship and human companionship. On June 11th, we have another short story coming up, The Paper Menagerie by Ken Liu. It's a deeply moving story of cultural memory, familial love, and loss, and the blending of realism with a touch of magical realism. And this is a direction I'm really wanting to push some of these reviews into this wonderful, wonderful genre of magical realism.
Mm.
So that's our plan for the coming month. I hope you'll join us in June and engage with us online on Facebook, on YouTube, leave comments, ask us questions, suggest to us future readings that you'd like to see us review, and we'd be happy to hear what you have to say.
And if you hope to read along, you can find the Facebook group for Books for Believers. We're in all of our future plans for reading. We're planned out through the end of the year are there. So if you'd like to be read before we release the video, then you should have plenty, ample time to do that and plan out your reading and acquisition of books because buying books is one of life's greatest pleasures. With that, we thank you so much for joining us and pray that the love and peace and grace of Christ will shine upon you as you do everything under the Lord, particularly enjoying the great works of poetry, literature, and short story that are available to us by His grace and mercy. And we'll see you next time.